Clinical Legal Education by Professor Dr. M.R. Principal of VM Salgoka College of Law, Goa, is somebody who has been in this field, setting the standards as such, pioneering the effort of bringing in clinical legal education, especially from the perspective of the practicing professional, trying to bring in as many students as possible into the profession as early as possible, even before they finish their degree. As a pioneer, he has taken Salgoka to very high levels with respect to how to get this implemented, and an original thinker in this particular regard. He has been trained, his LLM was in the Vanderbilt University, and he is a recipient of the Vanderbilt Fulbright Scholarship in Clinical Legal Education. Somebody who has pioneered this aspect of clinical legal education in India. I have had the opportunity to listen to his 3-day session in Trivandrum some years back, and the quality of his presentations and the exposure that he has had into this particular field is immense. So we would really benefit from his insights into this, and this is an area where most law schools, in spite of the theoretical aspects where we say that we are promoting it, practically most of the law schools are really behind, far behind the standards set by Salgoka College in respect of providing clinical legal education. This practical aspects and how to go about getting the students maximum exposure as such is something that we need to learn from the expert himself. So welcome, sir, to this session. We'll try to make it as interactive as possible so that you can give us more of your insights from your experience as such. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Anil, and thank you, Vishnu, for asking me to do this clinical legal education talk. What I usually do is there would be a lot of interaction if it is actually a physical class, but you all know that there is a limitation to how much we can have an interaction in this online class. So I would try my level best to do some interaction. Just give me a minute. I'm going to project it. Yes. So in between, I may ask few questions. As far as possible, try to answer at least few of you. That would be nice. I think at the end, we will have at least 20-30 minutes of question and answers. So what I'm trying to do this talk is basically I'm trying to introduce you the clinical legal education. This is how my presentation would go. First, we will be understanding the goals of professional education and particularly in the legal education. Second, then we will look into identifying what is the gap that exists between what we teach and what actually the profession requires. And also we would be very briefly focus on what are the learning objectives. That means as a law student, when you join in law school, what is your learning objectives in the law school? Then I will try to link that with the clinical legal education. Why clinical legal education is important in bringing these learning objectives to the students and also addressing the gap that has between the academics and the profession. And while doing that, I will be looking at how law colleges has played a role in promoting this clinical legal education. Then we will briefly dwell on what are the opportunities that we have and what we expect from the Bar Council of India and Legal Service Authority to strengthen this clinical legal education. Then I would also talk about how do we start clinics in our college. If you don't have clinics, how do we start? If you already have clinics, how do we strengthen these clinics? And very briefly, I would explain you few initiatives taken by my college. And then we will go into what is the way forward. This is how I would go into. Now look at what the professional education means, or why professional education differ from general education. In a professional education, students who undergo, first thing that they will do is we make them to think. So as a lawyer, as a or a chartered accountant or an MBA student, first they need to think. So if they want to think, we offer knowledge by classroom teaching, etc. But knowledge is not sufficient. For example, if you do BA, BSc and BCom, you get knowledge. But the same knowledge may not be useful for your job because you could take any other job completely irrelevant to what you learn in the college. But suppose you are a law student, then you obviously are going to practice law. Therefore, what you learn in the law school, you need to perform in the profession. Therefore, a professional education also requires to offer skills. Then third one is the professionals are supposed to conduct themselves. That means they should have certain attitudes or what we call is ethics. Certain ethics we need to provide them. So in that sense, we always have each profession the certain code of ethics. We have Bar Council of India prescribes certain code of ethics. Maybe the MCI for the medical profession provides. So that is the third part. But my question is, I always feel that the law is different from other professions. Of course, every profession thinks that. But I think that being a legal professional or a legal profession, it is different from other professions, hence requires an additional requirement. That means, in addition to the knowledge, skills, and ethics, you need to have a fourth one, that is socially relevant legal education. I generally agree that the education must be socially relevant, but particularly more so with legal education. For example, if you go to a doctor with a dysentery, he will give you a tablet. He would give you some 10 precautions. Every time you go for the same reason, he may prescribe a medicine, different medicine. But the doctor may not going to come to visit your house and see why are you getting every time. But in law, it is not like that. The legal education need to look into if something is happening repeatedly in the society, we need to look into why it is happening. Therefore, my argument is that the legal profession has a fourth dimension, that the legal education must be socially relevant. That means your law school, your law college should be relevant in the society. If society has some trouble, your law college should look into that trouble. Okay. So therefore, let me ask this question: whether our law college or law school, is it a law school or a lawyer school? Law school means we teach only law. We are not bothered about how they practice. But lawyer school means that we not only teach law, but we are also supposed to teach school. So anybody could respond, is it a law school or it is a lawyer school?
Law school, sir.
So you don't want to create them.
Lawyer school, sir.
Lawyer school, okay. Any more
It is
response?
supposed to be.
Yeah, I'm asking what it is supposed to be. Is it a lawyer school supposed to be, or is it a law school?
Sir,
It's
I
supposed to be a lawyer school, but then it is.
But sir, even if we
Okay.
say that it is law school, law is like all inclusive. It includes the society. For
Yeah.
law, society is the lab. So
Yeah.
whether even if we call it a law school, does it exclude society?
No. My idea is putting this question is not the society idea. See, the product of your law school. Directly go to.
Professor
Yeah.
Prasad, if I may.
Yeah. Yes.
So, who are the products of these schools? Do we have any other avenue apart from lawyers? And apart from that, who is guiding the curriculum? If it is the bar council, if it is the lawyers who is guiding the curriculum, well then law school is for the lawyers. But if we
Yeah.
feel feel that there is other avenue for law graduates, then certainly there is a great relevance for introducing those elements into the law school, where we can certainly say that the law school is for the law graduates, whether they become lawyers or not.
Okay, thank you. So there is a division of opinion among the participants. See, what I mean by law school is initially in early 50s and even till 90s, the teachers used to think that it is only law school. Therefore, we teach only the theory part, and we are not nowhere concerned with the teaching of the skills. The idea of lawyer school is now, if you look at immediately after you graduate from law school, majority of them join in the profession. Okay, if you want to become teacher, then you should have an LLM program, which supposed to you turn you from a student to a teacher. But after late 90s, all over the world, they look at law school as a lawyer school. It's not simply teaching the theory, though theory is important. We need to teach the intricacies of law. But a law school cannot stop only teaching those abstract theories, but also it should provide skill training. That means once you complete your law school, you should be profession ready. Though it may not be completely possible to a law school to turn you as a lawyer and send you to the society, unlike medical college where you have a lot of training on clinics. More or less now, this debate of whether it is a law school or a lawyer school is settled now. Most of the countries agree that it is more as a lawyer school than a law school. Okay, so now when I asked many students, I traveled widely in the country and asked particularly the final year students, what image it comes to you when I say lawyer? I asked them to give the quality. And these are, most of them, believe me, are the final year students. That means who are on the verge of joining in the profession. Look at the responses. I put in 3 colors. I hope you could see them clearly. The black ones are neutral. The green ones are very positive things. And the red ones are the red flags, which are a little disturbing. For example, if you see, some of the law students think the moment when I say lawyer, what comes to their mind is a liar without any ethics. He is a hired gun. He is a cheater. He is a money extractor, shark, crook, middleman, knife thrower, ambulance chaser. See, some of these uh, uh, attributes given by the law students who are going to join in the profession. So whether it is true or not, that's a different debate. But if the image for a law student is that there are so many red flags that comes, that shows that we seriously need to think about legal education in the law college, because it's not good for the society that the lawyers are looked at as a liar, as a knife thrower, as an ambulance chaser, as a hired gun.
Professor,
So therefore,
one second.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question? These questions were asked to national university students or even traditional schools?
including national law school, including national.
Okay.
And believe me, some of the national law school students were more pettier than the ordinary law college, because they start playing with the teachers. You know that many times they would do that, and they started giving me what comes to your mind as a lawyer means they will say black coat and white tie, band, kind of thing. But when it asked for this specifically for this, it came from all. It's not necessarily from one law college. Okay, so let us put few questions to make a brief background for why clinical legal education is required. The first question is, are we going to agree that there is a large gap between law in theory and law in practice? And the second question I want to ask is, do you think that the learning in the law school is not sufficient for the students to practice in quota? I think in both the cases we agree to a large extent, yes. I hope that everybody agrees that there is a gap, right? The theory, what we teach, what they practice. For example, when we teach public interest litigation, we may teach some of the case laws, how it was accepted, why it is accepted, what is the reason behind it. But we never teach how to file a public interest litigation. Similarly, we teach CPC, CRPC, evidence, but we never actually teach them how do you draft, go and file a case. Of course, drafting was made about few years back as a compulsory subject, but mostly we don't learn the actual practice in the courts in the law school. I'm not saying that they shouldn't, but I'm saying that there is a gap between these two. So therefore, my question is, what law school should do in this case? We understand that there is a gap between theory and practice. What are we doing? The first thing is we need to understand what kind of gap that we have. So let us look into what is this gap mean. Now I am putting in terms of question. Is law an academic discourse or a profession which requires a person? What happens majority in the law schools is it is an academic discourse. I'm not talking about only in India, even the country like America where the clinics are more prominent. So the majority of the classroom discussion is it is an academic discourse. Particularly the case method with the Socratic method teaching, they would be focusing only the appellate court judgments, and they would be telling 9 judges of the Supreme Court of United States of America how they are going to react if it is a gay rights, if it is a abortion issue, whether it is a fundamental right regarding to speech expression. This is the whole discussion that happens in the. But what we are forgetting is that this profession, it's not only academic discourse, but it also requires a performance. Academic discourse is important, but performance is also equally important. So that is what the gap is. And also the academic rigor, that means what we are teaching in the classroom actually used in practice. This is a question that we need to understand. And if I ask my students who come back after few years of practice, they say not necessary. Some, yes, but majority what you teach may not be used in practice. So therefore, the theories that they are learning in the law schools may not have much correlation in practice. I'm not saying that there is no correlation at all, but there is no much correlation in practice. So therefore, the question is, how do you reconcile between academic discourse and professional requirement? That means your academics do something, but the professional requirement is something. So therefore, there must be some kind of bridge between the academic discourse and the professional requirement. Let us understand how do we assess. For example, in most of the cases, I'm not saying all of, some of your colleges may have some problem-based test, etc. But most of the time, exams requires memorizing. In majority of the law schools, it is an end-term examination where you are given long questions you are writing, including mine. I'm not saying that I am a saint. Including in my college, it is basically majority of the exams are memorized. Whereas profession doesn't require the memorizing. Because you can open a book, read and tell the judge. You could argue. So the memory-based learning is required for academic excellence, whereas the profession requires analysis. So therefore, unless the examinations are analysis based, it is not going to be useful for them in the practice. Like they are asking, explain the salient features of Indian Constitution is no use in constitutional law practice in the High Court or a Supreme Court. Though it is important that the student should learn it, but their assessment completely on that will be a problem. Third one is unidimensional problem solving, because some of the universities do have this problem solving. But problem solving is always unidimensional. What I mean by unidimensional is, if it is a constitutional law problem, you give pure constitutional law problem. If it is a contract subject, you give pure contract problem. But in reality, they are always multidimensional. There is no pure constitutional law. The constitutional law with corporate law, constitution with labor rights. So there is always a multidimensional problem that you need to solve as a lawyer in the court. So a contract may have a labor law angle. A transfer of property may have a constitutional law problem. So that is one problem. Even if you are following problem solving, it may not actually give you that kind of skill that a lawyer required to deal in the court. And mostly we don't have much interdisciplinary approach. There may be few attempts made in some of the law schools, like 2-3 professors of different courses teaching come together and explain, but mostly it is one subject purely you teach. But whereas the profession is always interdisciplinary. And we also have this compartmentalization of teaching. That means constitutional law teacher will teach constitution, criminal law teacher will teach criminal law. But when the criminal law teacher used to teach death sentence, bringing constitutional dimension. So that is, some teachers do that, but most of the teachers don't. That's another problem of compartmentalization. Of course, I also understand we have a limitation in the classroom within 50 minutes, how much you can teach, portion completion, etc. We understand. So what is important in law school may not be important in profession. But I'll give you a great deal of contract law. In contract 1, maybe till 2008, Specific Relief Act was not taught in majority of the law schools. Then the new syllabus added Specific Relief Act into the contract. And even if it is entered now, 95% of the teaching is on the contract law focusing, and only 5% we focus on specific relief. But in the profession, specific relief is the much more used than the contract. So therefore, what is important in law school may not completely be important in profession. There could be many other examples. Then also, that is one of the reasons why we see our students who are getting gold medals are not necessarily a best lawyers in the profession. And we always see some of the backbenchers whom we never thought that they would be good enough, but they turned to be a good lawyer. Because to become a good lawyer, it is not only the knowledge, but the interpersonal skills are required. Therefore, they. So what is the problem? So this is the gap. So the gap is what is important for you may not be important in the profession. The compartmentalization of teaching and memorizing of for the assessment, etc. What is the problem? The problem that we identify is there is no practical training that happens in the most of the law school. The practical papers, in fact, was started in 1997 by the Bar Council. Till that time, there are no practical training is even mandatory for the law school. Then there are no training in the soft skills. This is particularly how do you conduct interview with a client, how do you counsel the client. There's much more soft skills that a lawyer requires. The law schools don't focus on. And also we don't have any exposure to the realities of the community. Unless the students are mixed with the community, there is no exposure to the community. Therefore, we may teach with a vigor how Maneka Gandhi case has changed the entire Article 21. But we don't see how that Maneka Gandhi judgment is important for the community. What does it mean to the community? Because you know that there are many laws, but when it comes to the implementation, we see there's nothing. Your right to life and liberty is gone to 6 during the COVID situation when lakhs of migrant laborers walking hundreds and hundreds of kilometers. So where is Article 21 happening to them? I am very happy to see some of the law students actually step in to support them. So that is the exposure, kind of exposure that the law student should require. So why this happens is very less community engagement. And unfortunately, what happens now is most of the educational institutions are away from the society. I'm not talking about other distance, but I'm talking about the physical distance. Most of the universities are emerging nearly 20, 30 kilometers away from the cities. So if you don't see the community, where is the question of community engagement? And also most of these universities with the big gates with heavily guarded discourages anybody to enter in. You look into the traditional universities. Traditional universities, anybody can enter at any time, but there's no more now. Maybe on the name of the security, maybe on the name of something else. That community exposure, community engagement with the law students is completely gone. Um, Even in my college, there was a lot of pressure on me to impose ID card entry and all, though we are not following it. So anybody, community member could walk in and ask something. But that is a privilege for few colleges, but most of the colleges will have entry. Then you have to ask whom you want to meet. They will give you a card. Then you have to go there and take a signature. It's like a complete like a corporate culture that is developing in the university. And some of the colleges may use simulations, but the simulations will not give sufficient exposure. They may be better than classroom. So what happens because of this? Long duration to settle in the legal profession. And the students need to spend minimum 3 to 5 years to learn the practical intricacies with the lawyers. And then that becomes a over reliance on the senior lawyers. And as a result, they are not systematically trained because senior lawyers are not equipped to systematically train their juniors. There would be n number of reasons. One, they may not have that idea. Second one is the junior lawyers are competitors for them. All the tricks of the trade they may not want to share. And particularly the professional evils would automatically transfer to younger generation. That means whatever your senior is doing, you think that it is constitutionally or legally it is permissible, which actually may not. And professional who has to step in? Bar Council of India. And we know that Bar Council of India, though it's a professional body actually, but it is not in a real sense. It is very ill-equipped to fill this gap. And in addition to that, we also have the students are not serious, teachers are not serious. Most of the colleges will have only visiting faculties. And students think that learning in the law school, there is no connection with the profession. Why should I study in the law college? So therefore, LLB degree becomes a life. That's the impact. Even now, the Bar Council of India conducts a bar exam. We all know how joke it is. I hope most of you agree that it is not that deterrent when it comes to restricting the bar. Okay. So therefore, the question is now, we understand there is a gap. We identified the gap. Now, how to address it? Now, you cannot fill the gap. I agree that no law college can turn law student into a complete lawyer and 100% lawyer and manufacture and send to the profession. It's not possible. So therefore, a law school cannot completely turn into lawyer school. That's not possible. But what is possible is we may try to narrow the gap. The gap between the academic discourse and the profession requirements could be narrowed. We may not completely bridge it. We could narrow. How do we narrow? Is one method is clinical legal education. The clinical legal education is supposed to address this problem to a larger extent, and it has a capacity to reduce the gap. I'm not saying that it is completely bridge the gap. It only capacity to narrow the gap if we use carefully. What we expect from the clinical legal education is it should develop the fundamental knowledge among the law students, and it also should develop the skills. That's very important. That means through developing the skills, they improve the capacity of the students to engage complex issues, not only simple issues, but a complex issue. That's what the lawyer does in the profession. So the students would be able to make judgments. Now, most of us are familiar with moot court. Now, moot court doesn't give this quality of judgment because never in a moot court history anybody has given a judgment after hearing the argument. So therefore, the students are very good at raising the issues, but not in a position to solve the issue. So what we need is a problem solvers, not problem escalators. That's what we require from a lawyer. And the clinical legal education also teach the students how to learn from experience. And most importantly, it makes them how responsible. For example, if you tell the students to read and come to the class, majority of the students don't do it. But in a legal aid clinic, they take responsibility. So that means they become an effective professional. So the advantage of introducing clinical legal education into law school is that it creates competent lawyers, and also at the same time they become socially responsible lawyers. So therefore, you improve the competency, but at the same time they are also socially conscious. So as a result, the society also benefits if we seriously take clinical legal education. Any questions till now?
So how do you get the students to be interested in this particular thing? Now, when we talk about getting them to be more active, in the sense that say knowing the theory part in order to give the professional part. No, you said making them take responsibility.
Yeah.
How do you go about actually putting it into practice?
Yeah. I think most of the time what we do is that the teachers take decision on behalf of the student. Like our parents used to take decisions on our behalf. I think we need to leave that decision making to the students and explain why this clinical legal education is important for them. So that's why what we do in, at least in my college, is that before the students, we request them to join in any clinic. We explain why this clinic is important for you, what the clinic is going to give you, what additional things that you are going to learn by joining in a clinic or an activity, then the students would be interested. So the most of the students, it is a motivation that is required. So that all depends upon how committed your teacher is. If the teacher is committed to a clinic, the teacher can always make the student learn it. And my experience is students more enjoy clinic than in the classroom.
Yeah, so that enjoyment part of it, no, because what I have seen is that there will be a core group of students who will be really committed and they will do that actual activity as such. There will be another group who just goes along with the enjoyment part of it in all clinics. So
Okay,
how do we get everybody to be involved?
Okay, what I mean by enjoyment is not the fun type. They enjoy doing and they learn. I'll give you an example. See, please remember whatever the activity that you do. For example, you're in your classroom teaching. How many of them are seriously listening? So the idea of the clinic is that you give that experience to the students who want to use it. See, you can drag a horse to the water, but you cannot make it drink.
True,
Yeah,
sir.
there would be some students who would be a free riders. That I agree. If there are 100 students, all 100 students will not learn. But suppose say only 10 students are interested, we are able to create a platform for them to learn. But my experience is at least they learn something. So the idea is in a clinic, when you create an activity, you should see that the activity should be carried by most of the students, not by few. That's a challenge, I agree. But there would be this kind of problem.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So what is this clinical legal? Sorry.
Professor
Yeah.
Prasad, if I may. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I really appreciate your. I mean, it's very coherent and erudite presentation. So I mean, you have raised a few very interesting points. I'll probably put up a few, maybe 2 or 3 questions or issues, and then maybe you can take your time to respond to them. So one issue is with respect to where you have mentioned, that the Bar Council is not a professional body. However, it is intimately concerned with somehow regulation and syllabus. And then you have also mentioned the gates of the law schools. They are not unfettered. There is a level of restriction. So you have we have been into this conferences and discussions on clinical legal education. The way clinical legal clinics actually, so clinical legal education is okay, but the way clinics function is that there is actually the people, the public who are uh, who can access the clinical law teachers or the clinics. So now the question is, who will be in that clinic? So generally in the world over, I mean, nearly everywhere I see and we have discussed, there are either you call them professor of practice, or there are people who are entitled to give a legal advice. But in
Correct.
India, law teachers are not entitled to give legal advice.
Okay,
Hence,
that
law
I'm going to
teachers,
address. I will
so
address
law
that. I will address.
teachers cannot man the clinics. So now this is one aspect. Now teaching clinical legal education in the classroom, make it interesting. I really appreciate you have put up a very great point in teaching of contract and including specific relief. So that is actually what we want. So some teachers, so again, the point that you made in the start, that whether we want to confine ourselves to a particular subject or we want to have a application based approach.
Yeah.
So even though in some law schools, and I'm sure in some NLUs, there is a pattern for examination, we have at least 80% application based questions, and it's not dependent only on a particular subject. So that's a very interesting concept.
That's great.
Now the difficulty here is, or maybe the hurdle over here is that how do you expect the teachers with who do not have any exposure to the courts, how do you expect, or do you feel that they might have some difficulties in equipping themselves to teach those applications in the clinic?
Okay. Okay. That's fine. Probably I would answer at the end, because some of them may, my slides may answer a few of them. Thank you. So let's continue with the clinical education. As the slide shows, is the Russian professor Alexander Lublinsky is the one who proposed the clinical legal education in similar lines of medicine. So I try to avoid the temptation of giving some kind of a definition, but ultimately I'm also a law professor. So we are fascinated with the definition, so I thought I will put it one. So clinical legal education is a kind of educational activity in which the law students learn by performing actual or similar tasks of the kind he or she will call upon to perform in her professional career. That means you do something as a learning process. What you are supposed to do in a profession is a clinical legal education. So the idea of the clinical legal education came from the clinics from the medicine. Like a doctor who will, after studying, they will go to the medical college hospital and then learn in a clinic how to prescribe medicine, how to diagnose, etc. The same way they should be doing in the law college. This is the idea of clinical legal. So the first question that comes to our mind is that what is the purpose of the clinic? There were two views in this. One is that the purpose of the clinic is to teach professional role in the legal system and improve professional skills. That means one thought says that the clinical legal education should be used only to teach skills among the law students. The another thought says that it is not for that, it is for the purpose of providing access to justice to the poor. But many of them think that clinical legal education should have both. That means the skill training as well as service to the community. So it is both are interdependent. There is no need to focus only on one. You improve the skills of the student, one side. At the same time, it also will help the community. Therefore, clinical legal education has two goals. One is you create a quality legal professionals by enriching their curriculum with the practical aspects. And at the same time, you provide service to the community. Why the service to the community is important, particularly if you look into India, you read the Legal Service Authorities Act, Section 12. It's if you follow that, who is entitled for legal aid in India, more than 70% of the population is entitled. For example, who is entitled? It says women. That means even if 49% of women in India, then workers, then backward class, SC and ST. So the list goes on. So it is more than 70% is entitled for legal aid, and whether Bar Council of India, legal service authorities, state level, district level, national level, whether they are in a position to cater to the 70% of Indian population, which is more than 80 crores. So therefore, there is a need for the law colleges somehow step into service to the community. Now, I would skip this because its time is going. What does it mean is, these are the learning objectives for a law student who joins. So I'll just briefly run through. This is, of course, I have taken from Benjamin Bloom. He has given a very, very long back. He has given these 6 domains, 6 objectives. If you convert that into law, in a law school teaching, first stage of law school teaching is you have to give a knowledge. That means, suppose you have taught him Donog versus Stevenson, the student should be able to state the fact. That means he got the first stage. The second stage is he should be able to comprehend it. That means, if Donog versus Stevenson case, if the bottle is not clear, that is opaque, whether the judgment would have been different, because the bottle is, I think, green in color, but if it is clear bottle, then what would have happened? That means you are comprehending what you are taught in the class. Third one is application. That means you should be able to apply Donog versus Stevenson to any other product. For example, if a fan rod was broken and fallen in my head, whether Donog versus Stevenson case would help. Then analysis, ability to differentiate obiter, dicta and ratio. That means what is obiter, what is binding, what is not binding. Then fifth stage is you should be able to synthesize. That is ability to combine the facts and law. That means you should be able to apply the law to the facts and decide whether a person is guilty of crime or whether there is a breach of contract or not. And the sixth one is evaluation. This is the last stage. This is the highest stage. That means you should be, for example, in case of Donog versus Stevenson, you said the manufacturer is liable for defective. What is the impact on the economy? That means the manufacturer. Now the manufacturers would have to take more care. That means they spend more money on that. Therefore, the product cost would be higher. Then the people has to buy with a higher cost. So they should be able to evaluate. That means a law student once joining the law college, he has to undergo the 6 steps. Are we able to do these all 6 steps in a classroom with predominantly lecture method, which is very, very difficult. So that's why we need this clinical legal education. Now, we say that we are going to send the students to legal profession. So if you are going to send them to the legal profession, at least we must think, what are the skills that a lawyer is required? I think somebody's mic, can you put off? Okay. What is the problem with this is, unless you identify the skills the profession requires, you cannot make your syllabi to that. Because when you are making a syllabus, you must have something in mind what you want to teach and why you want to teach. If you want to improve certain skills, what type of courses that you need to introduce in the law college is required. So for that, first you need to identify the skills that a lawyer requires. And unfortunately, there is no attempt, at least in India, was made to identify what are the skills. So these are few skills that I have identified with the help of one of the report in US that is published by McRate Report. If you type McRate Report, it's freely available online. They have identified majority of these skills. So suppose these are the skills that a lawyer is required. Now we need to think about how do we inculcate these skills in the law student with our traditional teaching methods or the substantive teaching of law. How are we going to do this? If we are not able to do this, what are the additional courses or additional activities that we need to do for equipping the students with this? I'm agreeing that we will not be able to do all, but at least remember that we are trying to narrow the gap, but not to bridge the gap. Therefore, there are many skills that can be taught in the law school. So, therefore, let me look into the clinical legal education, how it was started in India. Till 1997, there is no practical training is required under the Bar Council rules. In a sense, you may be having some moot courts and all, which is not, some places it is mandatory, some places it is not mandatory. There is no specifically, they say that these are the practical papers that you need to have. So in 1997, that the first step was made to institutionalize clinical legal education in India. So the Bar Council of India has issued a circular in 1997 saying that the 4 practical papers has to be offered. One is that moot court, client counseling, etc. Second one is drafting, pleading, conveyance. Third one is professional ethics, and fourth one is legal aid, negotiation, etc. So therefore, all of a sudden in 1997, every law college is supposed to teach legal aid, and it should be taught as a practical paper. And what happened with that is there is no much training for the teachers. Nobody knows what to do, how to start a legal aid clinic in the college. Nobody is there to help them, guide them. So many universities converted it into another written paper. So the very purpose of the practical paper is lost when they don't have resources nor the ability to offer. Then in 2008, the Bar Council of India Rules and Standards of Legal Education and Recognition of Degrees has changed these 4 practical papers. That legal aid paper, the 4th paper, is removed and brought ADR as a 4th practical paper. And they made legal aid as a compulsory for the final year student. That means the change that the Bar Council brought in 2008 is now there are 4 practical papers apart from legal aid, and legal aid becomes necessary for the final year students too. What happened? So because it became mandatory, majority of the law clinics were started only to fulfill the mandatory requirement. In 2010, I have conducted a survey in 7 states under the UNDP. We identified few colleges and we visited colleges, collected them information. So majority of the clinics were just started to mandatory. That means you start a legal aid cell in your college. Maybe allot one room for it, but there is no proper structure. There is no proper place. There is no policy. What kind of services that your legal aid centers are going to offer? And most of the teachers were of the opinion. What one of the participants asked me the question that because they were not allowed to practice, they don't have any practical exposure. Therefore, how they can man these clinics is an issue. That issue I will deal with a little later. As a result, what happened? The most of these activities of the cells were restricted to legal literacy camps. And some of the colleges, may not be all, but the literacy camps also you call a lawyer or you tie up with a legal service authority. Your students will attend the camp. Your students are not the one who is giving literacy. The legal service authority will send their own people. They will give the legal literacy to the people attended. The last students is either merely attending or doing the logistics of serving, arranging chairs, etc. That's not what the last students are supposed to do. That's not a clinical act. But it is happened. And majority of the national law schools ignored these directives of legal aid clinic and practical papers. Even I believe there are some of the top universities were not in a position to do this. There is no will to undertake clinical legal education very seriously, and particularly the legal aid programs were not undertaken by many premier law schools. Of course, now the trend is changing. Now most of these colleges do have some kind of a legal aid, but otherwise, it was not given any importance. So when we conducted the survey, what are the shortcomings? Why we are not able to do proper legal aid clinics in the colleges? The majority of the colleges first feel that there is a lack of financial support to do the activity. The second restriction is restriction on the faculty to practice. This is the opinions of the faculty members of different colleges in 7 states that I have taken. The absence of academic credit for the students. That means if they do legal aid, they don't get any benefit of marks, etc. Some places they do have. For example, we have 50 marks only for legal aid. Previously, we used to have for 100 marks legal aid. So some colleges, it is just an extracurricular activity. Therefore, the students are not interested. Maybe that's one of the reason. One of the incentive to the student is give the academic credit for their work. Then the next one is legal aid is not part of workload for faculty. That's another problem. Like students don't have academic credit. There is no academic credit for the faculty. That means faculty has to take 18 lectures per week plus do the legal aid. So that's where the problem would come. Unless the legal aid work is also inbuilt as a workload for the faculty, it would be. Then lack of involvement of bar. Bar council is never involved. The lack of infrastructure facilities. Most of the colleges don't have space, etc. Then lack of involvement of judiciary. The courts also not involved much. Even if you want to take the students to court for court observation and you want the judge to address them, most of the judges would say they are engaged. Otherwise, they are sorry. Then there is also a restriction on the students. That means they cannot practice in the court. They cannot represent the client. Then the remaining is no training facility for the faculty, no specific direction from bar council, absence of designated full-time faculty for clinical legal education, poor student quality, lack of trained faculty, part-time students. These are few of negligible reasons. So therefore, the next question obviously was, what support you need? Suppose you are a law college, you want to do clinical legal education or you want to start a legal aid clinic. What is required? Now here financial aid went to the third category. There they said because no financial aid they did not start. But here if you see, it is a mandatory collaboration with the legal service authority. That is what most important the colleges feel. If they involve with the legal aid clinics, the college can effectively function a legal aid. Then the involvement of bench, the judges also should involve, the court should involve. Then the third category is the financial aid and fourth category is academic credit. Then of course the fifth one is amending Advocates Act. Somebody asked that teachers cannot practice, therefore they cannot do legal aid. Okay, so these are what they want. However, to answer that question, how law teachers can man a legal aid clinic if they can't practice and they don't have practical experience. First thing we need to understand is legal aid has a 7 components. And this is not given by me, this is a committee on legal aid identified these. One is legal representation, second one is legal advice, third one legal awareness, fourth one paralegal service, fifth one is public interest litigation, sixth one promoting alternative dispute resolution, seventh one is law. Now, out of 7, what are we prohibited? The teachers and the students. Only the first one. Remaining 6 not prohibited. Even the first one is not prohibited entirely. You still can represent in consumer forum. We have a consumer rights clinic where my students represent the clients, actual clients. We won nearly 15 cases. Similarly, you could represent them in RTI commission or labor commission, all these quasi-judicial forums. You need not be a lawyer and it doesn't prohibit you from representing. You can do. Okay? You may take the help of your alumni students who are lawyers to 1 or 2 years to help you in representing. Then once the teacher gets the experience, the teacher can guide. It's always easy. And in fact, some of your teachers would be lawyers who are coming for a part-time teaching. You could take their help. So I could address that the law teachers, even though don't have a practical experience, can man the clinic. I did that. I don't have any practical experience. Wherever the practical experience is required, we take the help of our colleagues. So legal aid, legal awareness, paralegal, public interest litigation, alternative dispute, law reform. You need not. You can do it. So therefore, clinics can be established in any law college. It's fine. You can do it. Only thing is, don't think that legal clinic or clinical legal education is only representing that. That's not. There is much more than that. For example, the paralegal service. For example, I'll give you an example of COVID. If some students who are involved with data entry for migrant laborers to go back to their home, that's a legal service. Filling their forms, guiding them how to apply, where to apply. There are many paralegal services that you could offer, like drafting RTI applications, getting some welfare benefits for the poor people, workers, etc. There is n number of paralegal services that you can do. So, therefore, I asked also a question to the law colleges. What kind of activities that you could undertake? You could see there is no surprise. Legal literacy is on top. That means legal literacy can be done by any law school. So you start a clinic only for legal literacy. But that legal literacy has to be given by the students, not by the teachers going and delivering lectures or inviting the lawyer. The student should be strengthened to give this literacy. Similarly, legal advice, paralegal service, ADR, etc. So you could see how the colleges address it. This is a quote from Carnegie report from US. The Carnegie has done a wonderful report on law schools in America. I think it came in late 2000, 2009 something. One of the strong quote that it comes from a law student is that in America, law schools create people who are smart without a purpose. That means the moment you join in a law school, you make the law student to think like a lawyer. And then you completely lose what is the purpose of becoming a lawyer. The purpose of becoming a lawyer is to support the community that you lost. Similarly, we have in our college, some of the students used to say, we have all the way to go back to the moon and back, but we have a trouble crossing the street and meet our neighbor. So that's what the law students are supposed to do under the clinic. Meet the community and find out what is happening. So let us come to clinics. What kind of clinics that we can offer? It all depends upon your resource, your ability. There are two kinds of clinics. One is on campus or off campus. On campus means the clinic would be in your law school. Now, if it is in your law school, the question is how accessible to it to the community. That's the first question. My college is placed in the middle of the city, so access is not a point. But some of the colleges of yours may be away from the city, so then what will happen to them? And as I told you, as the gates and guarded people, it's very difficult for an ordinary citizen to come to your law school if so many formalities has to be fulfilled. So free access to the campus is one of the fundamental requirement for you to run a clinic. If that is not there, it's very, very difficult. To avoid that, you can run off-campus clinic. For example, Silgaonkar Law College runs 3 on-campus clinics and 25 off-campus. So my off-campus clinics are working in panchayats. Some of them are working in temples or churches. Some of them are working in schools where we get a free premises, and this off-campus clinics works once in a week. That means 3 hours on a Saturday evening. It works in 25 places in Goa. So there is no standard procedure that you should follow. It is left to you, the teacher and the college, their facility, their how students coming from which part, all these things do help in deciding where to have this clinic. So therefore, there is no one to fit for all is not the idea. Each law school should discuss, identify their strengths and weaknesses, and decide what type of clinic that you want to, on campus or off.
Prasad sir, what is the scope of online clinics, especially when the country is locked down?
Yeah, that's another method now. You could have an online clinic. We started what we called as a cyber clinic in the beginning, but somehow we could not continue it because we have issues of infrastructural issues, who will maintain the website and all. But some of the national law schools, some of the good universities like TERI or private universities, they have a team of IT professionals. You could easily run online clinic. Online clinic could be just giving advices or maybe drafting their petitions and sending them back, drafting their applications, recording, registering them online. There is n number of activities that you can do. It can be done through their home also, the students. It's perfectly fine. So I should add now on campus, off campus, and online clinics. Thank you, Vishnu. That's a wonderful
Sir, can I ask few questions, sir?
Very briefly, you can ask, yes.
Sir, how does legal startup and incubation centers, which has been established in a very few law schools, they play a crucial role for the revival clinical legal education across the law colleges existing in our country? The second question I'd like to ask that in every law school, sir, it has been understood that any student of law can work upon his leadership skills and practice their knowledge if they involve themselves in moot court activities and the other advocacy trials also. So the majority of the students in every law schools, they are more interested in moot court activities and they are less interested in legal aid activities also. So do you think that the pro bono activities can be made compulsory part of the legal curriculum as well also?
Okay, thank you. Okay, let me quickly answer that. The incubation centers are a great idea, startups also a great idea, but it will have a very limited application. It's good that some of them are starting the incubation centers. We were also supposed to start incubation center, but again, it will have very limited choice because very few students would be able to benefit, but nevertheless, it's a very great initiative. So to answer your second question, I would say the biggest problem what we face now is our clinical legal education starts with moot court and ends with moot court. And most of the lawyers whom I interacted, the most senior lawyers, they say that moot court is the best example how not to argue in the court. That's a problem. So therefore, why it becomes only students are interested in moot court? That is because most of the faculty are very well versed with moot court. Therefore, they promote moot court and they don't promote other activities. But if you see off late, ADR competitions are picking up. Even client counseling is picking up. And we need to encourage the students to go to the other competitions by explaining them what is the advantage of doing it. And to the another question that you asked whether moot court is sufficient, I would say no, it's not enough. There are many other skills that the moot court will not give you. Regarding the question whether we need to make pro bono as a compulsory, legal aid is compulsory. It is. It is. The final year students are supposed to be in the legal aid clinic, but unfortunately, there is nobody to monitor. The bar council doesn't even care for whether every law college has a legal aid, and whether we would be able to strengthen the law college. It's very dicey situation. You bring mandatory rule, but you don't give any sense of training the teachers to conduct that activity. How it would be possible for any law college to start with a legal aid clinic without having any idea? That's the problem. Therefore, most of the colleges do have legal aid, but not functional. So that's why I'm giving you an example how to do it. Now, what is the structure? Now, the biggest problem now is that because Bar Council says all the final year students should do legal aid. But in my experience, final year students are disastrous to be in legal aid because they are more worried about their completing their internships, they are completing their syllabus, then the exams, and they want to get out and get a job. So I think the legal aid should start at least the third year of 5 years course and second year of 3 years course. In my college, it is compulsory for them to do 2 years legal aid. So for the 5 years course, we start from third year, they go up to fourth year. If some students who can't do it in third year, they will go to fourth year and fifth year they join. Whereas for LLB 3 years course, we will always have from second year onwards compulsory. Now, because you make compulsory, the problem is there are so many number of students. How are we going to account? That's an issue. Unless you have so many clinics. In my clinic, not more than 15 students in a clinic. So therefore, initially, if you want to start only one clinic, then you have to decide how many number of students you want to take. Not too many, not too less. Then you need to identify who is the faculty in charge, and that faculty should be given some workload benefit in the teaching. Otherwise, it would be difficult. Faculty may burn out fast. Initially, you will do this because you are enthusiastic, but later it will be difficult. And many faculty members should be involved in that. My experience in one or two national law schools, there was a legal aid working well, but the faculty went on leave or not available or left the institution. Then they closed the legal aid. So that should not happen. There should be a continuity. And also, what type of infrastructure you require? Minimum, there must be a place where they could sit, and there may be a cupboard, one printer, one computer, some papers, some basic office furniture that you need. I think that you could easily procure from the college. It's not that difficult. You may have already printers, so therefore you could use some of them. You have all other facilities. It's not difficult to manage in the college. Then the important thing is a functional timing. Your clinic timing has to be something which the community would be able to easily access. That's why we keep it on Saturdays, particularly in the evening, so that the community members can approach. Then the focus of the clinic, what you want to do in the clinic. You want to just a general clinic that whatever the problem comes, you will undertake, or there is a focus that the clinic would look into only the issues relating to women, issues relating to children, or issues relating to consumer, or the clinic is only for legal literacy, nothing else, or clinic for paralegal services. So you decide what should be your focus depending upon what is expertise that you have, and do it start with that. Then once you start, the clinic requires a visibility. Visibility in the sense, how do you propagate your clinic in the community to get the people to visit your clinic? So you have to think about strategies by how do you, through websites, through social media, or inviting people, something that you need to do, how to show your visibility. Maybe tying it with the community radio, something you have to do for your. Then the most important thing is you need to train your students. So the clinical work is not that easy. It requires a lot of work for the students and also teacher. See, 1 hour class, if I'm teaching the subject from last 5 years, just 10 minutes preparation would be enough. But a clinical activity, it requires pre-preparations, it requires a lot of work. So these are some of the things that you need to think when you are starting a clinic. The other things that you need to look into the clinic is funding. In my experience, we don't require much funding. If it is on-campus clinic, we don't require any funding because everything is provided in the right. Maybe your students has to travel somewhere, representing them and all. Whether you want to pay their travel expenditure, etc., then that you need a funding. What we did is we started with a legal aid society and collected a fee for that. Each student has to pay certain amount of fee. We started with the 50 rupees. Now we charge about 750 rupees each student to be a member of legal aid society. And that money would be spent on the students and their activities. Therefore, they are learning by paying only 750 rupees a year. They would be learning much more than what they are learning in the class. That's another method of doing it. And we also get sometimes funding from the panchayat, sometimes legal service authority support us. Sometimes we get funding from Lions Club. There are many, many methods that you could, and particularly in national law schools and top universities, you could ask any one of the law firm to support. They would support easily, will support you. So for me, I feel that funding is not at all a problem. In fact, if there is a more fund, then your legal aid will grow. That's my experience in some of the colleges. Less funding, you work more. Then you need to look into collaborations with organizations, NGOs, etc. And most important thing is networking with the law colleges. That is what lacking in India. What is my clinic is doing, what is your clinic is doing. For example, now what happened is because my teacher who is also from Kerala went and 2, 3, 4 colleges and explained how we are working in a conference. So I'll give you how the networking works. One of the lady was found in Kerala. She was a destitute. Fortunately, they found an address in her bag relating to Goa. So the legal service authority member who attended that training workshop, remember the faculty. Her name is Sandhya Ram, who works in our college. He approached her. The moment we got that information, then we sent the local legal aid cell members who are working to verify whether that lady stays there, etc. And they could take the help of the police, went to that house, found that actually that lady was the owner of that house. The parents, the family members took her to Velankani and left there because she's not mentally sane. So we realized that immediately we took her back and we want them, family members, be able to reconnect them. So similarly, when there is a great flood in Kerala, we were able to send almost 2 bogies of food grains and other things from Goa to Kerala because we had a networking connection with the district legal service authority from Kerala. So the same thing we could have done very well in COVID situation. For example, a person who is staying in Goa wanted to go back to Bihar. Now, if we need a permission from Bihar, so we could connect with the Bihar law school based in Bihar, in his hometown or nearby. We could connect and then we can work together and help. Similarly, suppose we developed a particular pro forma to register something, to do something, it could be shared among other law schools. So that networking is very, very important. And also the law school clinic should have a need-based approach. That means if the community requires some consumer protection, you should be able to provide that. Going there and talking on women protection is no use because when you are doing legal literacy, you should address the local problem. Then more people will do that. So you should adopt certain model programs and please have realistic goals. Please have realistic goals because students will be available maximum 6 months in a year. Otherwise, they will have internships. They may have exams, all those things. So please keep all these things in mind that you are not going to be a law firm. You are going to be a law school based legal aid clinic. There is a lot of difference. Put some realistic goals. If you don't have legal aid cell, start a legal aid cell only for legal literacy to begin with. Just go to schools, address the schools on certain burning issues. I'll give you one example. Because we have the Child Rights Clinic under the new JJ Act, Juvenile Justice Act, and the POXO Act, if you take together the prevention of sexual abuse against the children, and then the Indian Penal Code. Now, if any girl below 18 years is incapable of giving consent for sex, we all understand that, but the children doesn't know. We have a number of cases in our juvenile and the children's court that both of them are 16 to 17 years of age. Both fall in love, they run away from home, they have a sex, and finally they come back to the home, either by parents brought them back or somehow they were caught. Now the girl side, they will put a rape charges against the male student, who is also a minor. But as per the rape law, if you are below 18 years, girl is below 18 years, it's enough. And under the new JJ Act, because now if you are above 16 but below 18, and if you are committed any offense which is a heinous crime means an offense that is above 7 years, is a heinous crime. That person may be charged as an adult. Now look at the complication. Just a love story, he would be an accused of rape. Now, who has to educate these children? How do you educate the children? So this is where the law schools can come. Similarly, talking about sexual harassment in schools, workplaces, etc. You can have a team of students under the supervision of a teacher, can go to organization, find out whether they have the complaints committee properly constituted. If not, strengthen them. And believe me, most of the government offices are open to ideas. It is our perception that the government doesn't work. But most of the government offices that we deal, they have no clue how to do it. If you tell them, they would be very, very happy. We did with the right to information, we did with the sexual harassment at workplaces. These are the areas that the law schools can meaningfully involve through clinics. And imagine, this prevents a lot of litigation. So you need not be in litigation. Leave the litigation to the lawyers. We can go pre-litigation stage where the law schools can really work. So these are some of the things that you can do: legal street plays, paralegal service, law reform. Law reform is a very strong area where national law schools can do. You have the resources. You take any law and look into the problems, reform, and bring the changes that you require. Impress on the law minister and the legal department. You have that resource. You can do it. National law school may not do offline campus, off campus like what we are doing, because your students are coming from all over the country. My students are 90% from Goa. Therefore, they are well connected with the community. They know the local language. They are from that community. So it works for us. A national law school, it may not work off campus, but a law reform, it's wonderful for national. Okay. So like that, welfare programs, public forums, there are so many I had given to you. Okay. So these are some of the activities that a law school clinics can take, depending upon your ability. I'm not saying that all you should take. Take one thing, that's enough. So what we expect from the Bar Council of India? One is that Bar Council of India, we are asking them to bring that every law school should have a clinical teacher. They should make it as mandate. I think that would address the question that was asked: how can we are not allowed to practice, but how do we manage? Maybe a practitioner with some kind of background should be appointed as a full-time clinical teacher. That would be wonderful. Some of the national schools actually do appoint some of the retired judges. They have that ability, but of course, colleges like me, where government provides fund, I cannot do that. Identification of model law schools. You identify certain model law schools in the country. And I'm not saying that Salgaonkar Law College is the only law college have clinics. There are many other colleges have good law clinics. Unfortunately, we don't know. That's the problem. So therefore, we need to identify some good model law. Fund the clinics, give some funding, and have exchange programs between the students and the teachers. We would be happy to host any teacher who want to come to us to look into how the clinic works. In fact, we had an exchange program with the University of New South Wales, Sydney, for the child health clinic. Our students visited their clinic last year, and their students visited in the month of January our clinic. They spent 10 days here learning how the clinic works. So the same thing can be done with some students in India. We will be happy to, we are open to it. We need some 5 training centers in 5 regions that the Bar Council should start teaching, training the teachers, training the students how to start the clinic. And also develop clinical manuals, create database, maybe start one clinical law review or clinical law journal. Support the good practices. Some college comes with a good practice, support it. Encourage the research. I remember, I think NUAS has sent their teams when there was a earthquake. Even Bangalore National School has done some excellent work. There are many private colleges that are doing. Even Delhi University Law Campus Center is doing an excellent work with the slums. There are many colleges that are doing good work. And particularly, we look into legal service authority. This is the biggest problem that we are facing. Most of the legal service authority don't spend their money. So they need to provide meaningful collaboration with the clinic. It's very important. The legal service authorities have a capacity to fund the clinics. So they can provide budgetary allocation, which is legally allowed under Legal Service Authorities Act. So the mandatory legal aid clinics in prisons and other correctional homes, the legal service authority, if they direct that the law student should be involved in these legal aid clinics in prison, with one order, we should be able to enter into prison. Otherwise, it's so hard to enter into a prison. So we could even provide internship with pro bono lawyers. That means the lawyers who are working pro bono, maybe some students can be attached to them. We need to revamp National Legal Literacy Mission. I'm very unfortunate that it is a great initiation, but it didn't continue. Involve faculty and the students in its mission. That's one of the important for legal service. Academicians are not involved in that. Surely the judges are involved or some lawyers are involved. Maybe few academicians would bring some better. Then encourage internships and research facilities on legal aid by the law college. So I'm coming to almost fag end. What we do in VMS College, Salgaonkar Law College, we have, as I told you, 25 off-campus clinics. They work every week 3 hours in 25 places, mostly in North Goa, that is where my college, and few in South Goa. We also have on-campus clinics. Right now we have 3: Child Rights Clinic, Consumer Rights Clinic, and Disability Rights Clinic. These 3 clinics work. And 3 more on pipeline. The prison clinic, as I told you, that we would be starting a clinic in the prison. The Legal Service Authority has agreed for that. We want to start this criminal law advocacy clinic in association with the police. And another thing, I'm in class, ask them to wait. And the clinic for rights of construction workers, we are supposed to start, if not this COVID happened by this time, it would have. We had a support from an NGO and also the support with the Labor Commissioner from Goa, that we are going to start a clinic exclusively for the construction. So these are some of the examples. This is not the only exhaustive list. So it is all depends upon with whom you have good connections, you start a clinic. Then we do practical training. That means we teach the students, we provide simulations for negotiation, mediation, client counseling, trial advocacy. Most of you must be doing that. Then we also do a lot of paralegal services. That is, mostly we look into various welfare measures provided by the government, and we go to door campaign, identify who are beneficiaries and make them to apply for it and see that the benefit is given to them. Legal literacy, most of you are doing, we will be doing the same. And then we also have nearly 21 public interest litigations successfully filed by my students, all of them. So various range of activities that public interest litigations were filed. But I say that public interest litigation is a dangerous weapon. So you have to be very careful while using it. So this is a Goa map, and wherever that circles are there, those are the areas my 25 legal aid cells works. Of course, earlier it was 40 cells. We reduced to 25 because it is difficult to manage. And all my faculty is involved. That means uh, two of these legal aid cells will be controlled by one faculty. That means 100% all teachers are involved with the clinics, so that there is a continuity. These are few examples of poster making and disseminating. This is the actual legal aid cell where the students sit, visiting old age home, interacting with the people who are destitute, with their identifying their problems and helping them. These are some of the street plays in different places. This is an exhibition you could see. Justice Ahmadi is in that picture. It is in the college. We had an exhibition. We invited many schools to come and visit. So what is the way forward? The way forward is we need the regional training of trainers program. That means each region we should conduct training to the faculty who wanted to start these legal. We need to identify the potential law schools in each state and then strengthen them by supporting them fully functional legal aid clinics in the selected law colleges. We know that there are more than 1,600 law schools. It is impossible for us to do, and many of them may not be interested. But at least we would be able to identify 100 to 200 law schools who are interested in various regions of this country and start training them and develop the network and sharing best practices among these. Then you should have teacher and student exchange program. Identify expert clinical faculty to prepare training manuals. Create a website for sharing. Identify and train clinical teachers. That's very, very important. Motivate the students and faculty to take clinics. Collaborate with various stakeholders. That's a very important thing. We need to collaborations with the government. We need to collaborate with NGOs, with schools, and active involvement of legal service practice is very, very crucial. But this requires a lot of money, right? This requires a lot of money. So unless somebody like a Bar Council of India or somebody who can do this is difficult. I tried at my individual level, like asking a particular law college can host 20, 25 law colleges within that region. I travel there and then conduct some of the training workshops. But it's not methodical because it's an individual initiation. You need a institutionalization of this mechanism. That is what required. See, I feel that, of course, this is the last slide. This is a school where my students performing their street play. It's very, very important for us to understand that the clinical activity is one of the best methods to learn. Learning by doing, they would retain. Mostly by about 75% what they did, they would retain. And I could see some of my students who cannot speak in the classroom after joining into the legal aid. Now they are orators in the public because they were forced to talk. And they know how to tackle the government, how to tackle with police, etc. And most importantly, you must have somebody, of course, in that sense, I'm very blessed because in police, in government, in many of the departments, my student alumni is there. So who had this exposure to the legal aid. So when I go back to them asking them their help, they understand how it is important. I'll give you one example. For example, if you want a ration card, the migrants come to the Goa in search of jobs, and they stay here for more than 7-8 years. They don't have a ration card. Now they want ration card. They have so many documentation required. In a real sense, if you go to the officer, the executive officer, he would refuse. But if that executive officer is my student and he has undergone this problem because he has exposed to the community, he understands the problem of not having documentation. Then they would come out a different manner. They look into the problem in a different way. Okay, this document is there, whether we can take an affidavit from the person, bring, if this is not there, maybe the other one. So he may try to convince the government that these are the people required. So these are the things that reforms takes place. That's the advantage. So at least in my personal experience, I believed that clinical education works. This is one aspect of the clinical education. The other aspect I have not spoken because today we are speaking only on the clinic. Other aspect is you can teach substantive law in a clinical method. That's completely a different setup. So I'm talking about only to start with the clinics. So therefore, my humble request for all of you is that if you are interested, you can do it. And I did it purely on trial and error base. And the best experience is that the teacher learned along with the student over a period of time how to counter things, how to change things. So it is all learning by doing. You can do it. And if any help is required, we are always there. And there may be many colleges who are doing better than me. I don't know. So that's the problem. So that's why we need to connect. So I would stop on this. Any questions I would be glad to take.
Yes, sir. And there are a few questions in the chat box also. Please kindly
Okay.
see them.
Okay, I'll just check it. Or if I think I need to check that. Vishnu, can you read some of them? Meanwhile, I'll finish this. I am not able to.
Yeah, of course I can do that. Muhammad Omar, from his an assistant professor in Bennett University, he is asking, how can we guide students to become just arbitration professionals? I don't understand that. How can we guide students to become Muhammad Omar, can you just come on and ask the question, please?
Can he ask? I'm not able to see the chat properly.
Dr. Omar? Yeah, he's asking, how can we guide students to become just arbitration professionals? Are there any certified courses apart from regular classroom teaching? I don't know what is this just.
May I put
Maybe
it in
Okay. One.
Right. So the question was that when we talk about clinical legal education, many students are interested in arbitration. And so how do we ensure that they become good arbitration professionals? And in fact, this thing it cuts across every discipline of law, because unless and until teachers themselves are trained in a certain practice, it is very difficult for them to take up the clinical legal education. So if you can please guide if there are certain certification courses, if there's something teachers can do, if there are any litigation
Okay, I got it.
opportunities for the teachers. Yes.
I got that. Now my chat is working.
Yes.
Now, see, first of all, this idea of today's presentation is how to improve the skills and make them better professionals. If you are looking purely on arbitration, then the teacher who is teaching the arbitration has to come up with a clinic. For that, of course, there are certified courses. I don't know. I'm not an arbitration teacher anytime. But my guess is that if you are an arbitration teacher, you need to understand what skills an arbitrator require, and students who are present, sorry, the parties who are presenting before the arbitrator, what skills they require. I do know that arbitration almost similar to litigation, but there is a lot of difference when it comes to their presentations and how they are addressed to each other and all. I think these things you need to get a professional training from any arbitration board or something that they should be able to do it. I think maybe that question should be asked Ajay Thomas. I think Ajay was still there. Ajay Thomas. Ajay, are you there?
Yeah, Dr. Ajay is here, sir.
Not Ajay Thomas. If he is there, he could address because he is into arbitration. I'm not into.
And sir, just one ancillary question to that, not just arbitration, to take up any field of legal education, the teacher has to have a practitioner's perspective also. Now, as of now, the BCI rules don't allow the professional teachers to enroll in bar and practice and get a taste of practice as well. So, do you think that there is some thing going on at the policy level which can ensure that at some future point of time teachers can also practice and teach, because then the classroom environment will be totally different?
Yeah, see, the issue is that's again that is in our mindset, that because we are not allowed to do practice, therefore we cannot start clinic. I clearly explained you there are 7 components of legal aid where only one component is legal representation. So please first get out of that mind that clinic means that we are going to represent the client. It's not. So what you can do, see, what you have nothing in your hand, don't worry about it, because nothing will happen. What is there in your hand? That is what you should focus. What is there in your hand is that you could run all 6 components other than the representation. And even if you want to do the representation, represent in the consumer forum. So you talk to the consumer law, whoever teaches the consumer law, and discuss with them. Maybe take the advantage of your alumni or somebody as a lawyer to come for a year to train the teachers to the students, and the teacher sits along with the lawyer, look into how they draft, how do they argue, all those things. Within 1 year, the teacher becomes expertise in that. That's what we did. My teacher also, Professor Shabir Ali, who is a full-time teacher, he runs the clinic now effectively without any problem, because that is what we did. So any area, for example, if you want to deal with public interest litigation, you are a constitutional law teacher, you know concepts, but you don't know how to do it. Maybe ask one of the lawyer to help you in the initial stage and get it.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I can see a few more senior professors raising the hand. Professor Anju Wali, ma'am, from Delhi University.
Namaskar. Namaskar, everybody. There's a question on a theoretical level first, that when we are talking about legal aid, is it that we are thinking it as, or moot court for that matter? Moot court certainly is a curricular course, but legal aid, making it mandatory, whether it would be on a co-curricular basis or it would be on extracurricular basis. My concern is I am from law school, Delhi University, and the intake of students every year is roughly plus minus 9,950. So every year in the college, we take 950 students. I'm just wondering, how is it possible when they reach over to the 3rd year, at least 700 plus students are there? How do we deal and handle with those scant resources? Mandatorily the course of legal aid, and how do we make available the legal clinics to them? And thirdly, when you say that you have got 25 off-campus clinics, how do we manage them? How many teachers go there? Because somebody would be supervising them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So let me quickly answer that. First thing is, legal aid, should we make it mandatory? It is mandatory already according to the rules, but it doesn't have any academic credit as per the 2008 Bar Council rule. So it has to be decided by the individual universities whether to give an academic credit. You can. That's what I did. We are giving an academic credit from Goa University. Therefore, every student has to undergo. And fortunately, madam, we are not Delhi University. I know, I understand you have so many number of students. My number of students would be around, say, 200 to max 300. It would touch for who are into the legal aid. So therefore, if you have 700, 800 students in the final year, how to do the legal aid? You need to look into what type of legal aid clinics you could expertise and bring in. So that is what we are doing now. Why we are doing 25 legal aid clinics is because every student has to undergo this. Now, how do we manage each? We have about 15 faculty members. 15, not 50. It is 15. So each teacher is given 2 legal aid cells as a monitoring, and then there is one full-time teacher who is a director of legal aid society, who would be the in charge, and there is another teacher who would be supporting this. So that means the structure is like this. There is director of legal aid society, assistant director, associate director for legal aid society. These are the two ones who would be taking general policy decisions on what we should do in the legal aid clinics, and then 2 clinics each given to one teacher, and the teachers are explained what are the activities that they should do. The students maintain a diary, case diary, the cell diary, we call legal aid cell diary. Every Monday, because Saturday is the clinic, Monday they would bring with the attendance and the activity what they have done, and it has to be signed by the teacher in charge. And the teachers will do surprise visits, and the students are not supposed to give advice immediately. They are supposed to collect the facts, whatever the problem, and then they would discuss with the teachers, concerned teachers, and the faculty, the lawyers who are teaching in the law college, and then only they give. What they do directly is paralegal services. They are trained already, so they do directly. So therefore, how do we manage? You need more clinics, definitely. It depends upon the teachers who want it to. For example, my child rights clinic, we have 30 students because they visit JJ board and the children's court. And then some of the students were given the task of legal literacy, going to the schools, targeting the schools, and discussing about the rights of the children. So you have to divide the activity. I think it should be done if most of the faculty involved.
I have an ancillary question. If Vishnu, you would permit me.
Of course, ma'am, please go ahead.
Yes, ma'am.
Just one question to that. Now that you have got a director of legal aid clinic and others as well, is it counted towards their workload?
Yeah, some benefit we give, that's true. Because we built legal aid as a part of the subject. So that workload will be distributed to the teacher. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Without that, madam, it will be difficult for the teachers to do. You cannot run it as an extracurricular activity. It has to be run as a part of your academy.
How many faculty members do you have that 15 out of that number of teachers are can possibly be adjusted and accommodated with the additional workload of legal aid?
See, what happens is when we count, see, that all depends upon your principal or dean, how to arrange that. Each subject here we have 6 teaching hours and 4 hours of what we call tutorials, etc. So therefore, in that sense, the senior teachers don't teach more than 12 actual lectures. So they get benefit of this. So it's a complicated working with the timetable. If you're, I think Madam Vedkumari should be more confident about doing this because she is one of the clinicians. We were looking at her in the initial stage of learning.
Yes, Professor Vedkumari happens to be there, but there are lots many infrastructural constraints.
I understand Delhi University, madam. I visited Delhi University. In fact, I delivered a lecture.
He and me are both together in the same center.
Same center, yes. I know that there is a big problem with the Delhi University because the sheer number of students and the place.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I can see Mr. Ajay Thomas also raised his hand a couple of times. Mr. Ajay, if you can intervene. Okay, is there anyone else who wants to intervene? I can see the presence of many senior teachers, including Avasthi sir, Professor Sharda Patil from Karnataka State Law University, Dr. Snehal Fadnavis from Govindrao Vanjari Law College, Nagpur, and I mean, again, many juniors
I believe Mini Srivastav has asked one question. How
Yeah,
do we?
Mini, she's from Amity Law School, Noida. Please,
Yeah.
Mini.
Okay.
So, thank you very much for the wonderful presentation, sir. It was really nice
You're
to
welcome.
hear very clearly about how exactly clinical legal education can be, uh, mixed with the normal teaching and how successfully, in simple ways, also we can do it. So that is very nice. My question is that you had rightly mentioned about the first set of reforms which the Bar Council of India had introduced to the law school teaching in order to bridge the gap between the law schools and the profession. So, I mean, I think now it is time that we can again, like Legal Academia is a group wherein a lot of teachers from different law schools across India are there. So how about collecting such good thoughts and again somehow putting across the point to Bar Council of India that it is high time that we again come up with another set of reforms so as to bridge the gap. That's my observation.
Yeah, thank you. That's a wonderful question. Actually, in fact, my idea was that every substantive law should have a 2 credit course of practical training. For example, after teaching constitutional law, there should be a course on constitutional law practice, and this should be completely optional for the student. Similarly, after you complete contract, drafting of the contract should be 1 credit or 2 credit course offered by somebody, and it should be made optional. Like that, that is the next set of reforms that actually required to bridge the gap. But my problem is Bar Council, I don't think it is very serious about it. Maybe that's a good idea. Legal Academia can draft a policy and submit to the Bar Council. And in fact, in 2007, 6 or 7, I think 2006, we have made a proposal to the Bar Council that we should able to conduct the training workshops for the teachers, and the Bar Council should support it for implementing those practical papers. They have not even responded for that. So the problem with the Bar Council is I don't know whether they have resources to do it, both financially as well as the human resources. That's going to be a challenge.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Yeah, anyone else? Any other interventions, please?
Hello, sir. Sir, this
Yeah,
is
Annapurna, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah,
I think you are a professor student, right, in ILI?
No, sir. I'm also third batch from ILI. I think sir was not there at the time when I joined.
Okay.
But I know him personally because in my previous institute he came for a visiting lecture. So I knew sir also for FTP
Okay,
he came in. Yeah.
Okay.
So like, I have 2 questions. Like one is like to what extent it is reasonable for the students to index the clinical courses at the early years of their law courses. Like in first 2-3 years only they are subjected to clinical courses where they have not even come up with what actually it is. And when it comes to the final year, they were subjected to general and honor electives like that. And second question is like that, why can't whether the idea of integration of law courses with the nearby course in that specific jurisdiction can bridge the gap? These are the 2 questions I would like to pose to you, sir.
Can you repeat the second one?
Like whether the integration of law colleges or law schools with the courts of nearby jurisdiction, whether it can bridge the gap.
What do you mean by courts by jurisdiction? Means you want them to be in with the court?
Because yes, sir. Because besides only legal literacy camp and also legal aid camp, like there are certain other courses are there. Like I used to teach law, foreign trade and exchange, where even we need to know about the commercial dispute resolution also, like integration of. Sorry, I don't know to what extent it is like a good idea, but how to what extent this idea can be implementable.
Yeah. Let me answer. First one is whether the student should be inducted early years into clinical legal education. They can, but then again you have to see what activity that you are allowing. For example, if it is a legal literacy and all, it's fine. Some of the paralegal services, they can able to do it. But providing legal advice and legal representation in consumer forums and all, you need a little more senior level. So, for example, in our college, we are, as I told you, we start at the third and fourth year compulsory, so that they have time for them to spend, and they at the same time they are not too young to do this. But if you want to expose them to the clinic in the beginning, you can. There are different methods of clinic. Second one is that law schools course for other courses. Yes, see, if you see in some of the foreign countries, they do have corporate law clinic. Similarly, you can have some of the national law schools or top universities who have much higher resources, where the students are not from the same locality but from different areas. You could start something like that. A GST clinic you can start, and if you know how to, what are the GST rules, and maybe small traders you can call them and train them. Or suppose somebody wanted to start a company, they don't know, but they are small people. They are not big people to hire lawyers. Your corporate law clinic could help them. Similarly, IPR clinic, you can help the farmers and small people who wanted to have their product to be recognized for either copyright or designs, whatever it comes. So there is no limit for clinic. It all depends upon the subject you are teaching. For example, in foreign countries, they do have these housing clinics. Then they have refugee clinics. They have different clinics. So it all depends on the teacher and the resources of the institution.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah, unless we have any further questions, maybe we can go for a vote of thanks. Is there anyone else? Prasad sir, can we wind up?
Yeah, I think Zubair Khan has given a question whether clinical legal education play a role in resolving the issues of lack of dedicated legal counsels for various state legal service authority. I feel yes.
Okay. Okay, I did not look at the chat box. Have you gone through the chat box?
No, my chat box is working, therefore I could see it. That's the reason I'm looking at.
Okay.
Somebody, Ram Charan Meena, she is asking, Ram Charan Meena is asking whether we should give practical exposure to law students. Should a whole semester during LLB meant for practical exams like internship under guidance of practicing advocates? It's not a bad idea. I think that KITS Law School is supposed to do that. Last final year should be given to the completely for the practical training, but I don't know whether they started or not. Professor Meenan was advocating that idea. But the problem is again in practicing advocates, the difficulty is that practicing advocates should have academic bent as well as practicing. Like we are handicapped with the practicing, they may lack academic bent. So it's carefully chosen. Yes, that's possible, but it doesn't work. The students would think they will take it light for full semester. Rather than that, it should be spread even to 2-3 semesters would be nice. That's what I feel. I think that's it.
Yeah. So maybe Mahesh, may I request Professor Mahesh to give his concluding remarks and vote of thanks. Thank you. Please unmute yourself, Mahesh. Your mic is Mahesh. Yeah.
I think we all should start with thanking Professor Prasad for taking time out to do this session. We can see that he is actually in his office. It's a working day, but despite that, he has taken out time to do this wonderful session on clinical legal education. And in that presentation, I think he really mapped out a lot of things, including why we do it, what are the different avenues in which we can do it, what are the methods that we can adopt for the purpose of establishing clinics. So it's been a very comprehensive presentation. And the key takeaway for me at the end of that whole presentation is that there might be several limitations, but if we are not establishing good clinics in our law schools, it's only because we have not put in enough efforts into it, or we are just not interested enough. Because I think in the last one and a half hours, he has really explored and given us a lot of options on how we can take it forward. Looking forward, I think one thing that we'll probably have to do is try and map out and document what are the different practices that different law school has been doing on this. When I went around doing I've been working on child rights for the last 6 years, and in connection with that, I've visited different law schools, especially the ones that have a child rights clinic. And I found that there is a variety of practices that different law schools have been adopting for having robust clinical systems. I think NLU Odisha has also done quite a lot. And then there are these advanced models that law schools like NLU Delhi has been doing, where focused attention around some themes. I think their death penalty clinic is probably a great example of how far and how much can law schools do to advance a whole set of things. It's not just clinical legal education, it's also socially relevant work. It's wonderful research. So probably the death penalty clinic in NLU Delhi is a great model for all of us to learn from different dimensions. And then of course there are models at NLS Bangalore, which is extremely student driven. So their consumer protection clinic or generally their legal aid clinic is extremely student driven, and faculty really has only an advisory role. Probably that is where everything should lead to eventually, that faculty only has the role of giving a broad set of advice or coordinating with the university, but it should be taken over by the students and sustained ultimately by the students themselves with a lot of alumni involvement. So probably there is a amount of work that we need to do to try and document these practices in a more systematic manner so that it can be disseminated across the country. But the great key takeaway for me from Dr. Prasad's lecture is how we have to focus on the local issues. Everyone need not work on national and internationally relevant things. We can build a great clinic just by focusing on issues which are really relevant to the immediate locality, even the town, city, or village in which the law college is situated. So that's, I think, the greatest takeaway from all of us. And also the fact that if we are not having a good clinic, it's only because we are finding excuses. There are enough and more methods available to establish a great clinic. So thank you so much, Dr. Prasad, for taking time out to give us this lecture. Something I'm sure you've been doing a lot of work around this over the years, and you hope that we can continue to look up to you for leadership in the sector. I also thank Dr. Vishnu for really putting this Facebook group together, for bringing all of us together and organizing these lectures. I think though we are in the middle of a lockdown and all of us are busy in our own ways, he's really taken out time to have this initiative. Thank you also for all the attendees. Thank you for Dr. Anil for introducing and setting the tone for today's discussion. Thank you all the attendees for taking time out to come together to attend this program. I'm sure we've all walked away with having learned something, and hopefully we are motivated to do something at the places where we work. Thank you one and all.
Thank you all. And if anybody need my presentation, I think Vishnu, you can share it. I have no objection with that.
Of course,
So
sir. And I'll be uploading this video on our Facebook group.
And
maybe
I firmly believe that there should be no copyright on anything. So you can just
nothing, sir. The copyright belongs to only you, only to you. And whenever you find time, if you can just answer the questions that raised by the members there, it'd be great. If they are raising some questions, I don't know.
Okay. Fine.
So thank you so much, sir, and thank you.
Can we sign up? Can we sign up?
Yeah, let us sign off. Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.